Water systems here in the United States of America are not only being targeted, but they're being actively attacked as of right now. And this is something you should be paying attention to because one of the easiest ways to affect an entire population negatively without ever having to set foot on American soil is through our water systems. And on November 25th, the Associated Press actually reported that the Municipal Water Authority of Aliquippa in Pennsylvania was hit with an international cyber attack. And the problem is that small water utilities like that one are grossly underprepared for dealing with cyber attacks. They don't have the defenses or the security systems in place to deter them. And in fact, that plant in particular was built in the 1930s with no outside help when it came to defenses, and they're building a new one right now for $18.5 million. And there's no outside help coming for that one either when it comes to cybersecurity. And that's why these particular facilities are being targeted in the sense of being in rural, small town areas because they don't have the funding or the infrastructure to actually deter an attack. And that particular water treatment center was attacked as well as other ones, and they were all attacked by an Iranian-backed hacker group. And one of the other reasons why they're being attacked is because they're using Israeli-made hardware systems. And it's going to affect a lot of people here in the United States of America. And we're going to talk about a couple ways you might want to prepare for this because it is something that is becoming more and more aggressive when it comes to these targets being attacked. Now, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and thanks to them, I can get out here, give you this information, and they can also help us all prepare a little bit better for some of the events that might occur here in the future. Now, Unitronics is the name of the hardware that's being hacked by these groups, and it's basically providing programmable logic controllers that are being exploited in these water systems. Now, hackers can shut down pumps or they can contaminate the water by hacking into these controller devices and changing different amounts of chemicals being added to the water or just shutting them off completely. And either way, you're going to create mass hysteria and chaos, especially if an entire town loses access to water or if that water becomes poisonous. So this is a really big deal. Now, there's at least 220 Unitronic systems being used in the US right now. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot compared to the overarching amount of water treatment facilities across the US. But if you want to do the math, okay? Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, is a town of about 22,000, all right? And they had one of these systems. So if 220 of these systems exist in the US right now, and they're all in these smaller sized towns, let's just say, well, do the math. 220 systems multiplied by 22,000 people would equal about 4.84 million people it could affect. And that's a lot of people that could suddenly find themselves without water or with non-potable water or whatever it might be. So what do we do about it? Well, first off, you got to keep an eye on it. If you're not scanning for information related to these types of cyber attacks, then you're going to fall behind if one happens in your area. Because in all reality, if you find out because either somebody gets sick in your house or because somebody tells you through the grapevine, it might be already too late based on how much water you've been consuming, right? So you have to be scanning for information. But the other thing you can do is during times like this, if you're connected to a municipality when it comes to your water supply, you can either take a few approaches. You can start storing water now so that you can access that water if you're no longer able to use the water that's being supplied to your home. So that gives you at least one option to have water that you know is relatively safe in comparison. You also can use filtration systems. Now, those can't guarantee that whatever they do to the water might not be bad enough to still affect you, but it could just be an additional layer of defense when it comes to making sure that the water you're drinking or using in your household has been treated to a degree. And for example, the water I drink in my house goes through a reverse osmosis system, right? But I'm also on a well, so I'm not as at much of a risk for these types of events as somebody who's on a municipality's water system would be. But that's just one example of something you can look into. Or you could use a gravity-style filter system, like what Berkey makes and stuff like that, if you want to have a way to try to get the water to go through an additional filtration process. But I think a big one is going to be being aware of it actually happening. And if the concern raises to a degree where water systems around the country are starting to get hacked and exploited and people are being affected by it directly when it comes to their health, it might be a good process or due diligence to go through and start treating and filtering your water prior to using it just out of safety. Even if you're not necessarily being told that an attack has happened in your area or that there is a high risk of one, it could just be a good idea to put that water through the process regardless to make sure you're staying as safe as possible, because it's highly likely that some of these attacks could go through that aren't noticed right away, and the next thing you know, people are drinking this contaminated water before they're told about it, right? That's an issue. So I think water storage is a great one. So that way, if you find out you can't use your water anymore, you have access to water. I think that having ways to treat your water is extremely important. But I think the most important part of this whole thing in order to prepare for these types of attacks is to be aware that they're occurring in the first place. So you need to be paying attention to this type of information. You need to be scanning for these types of alerts when it comes to cyber attacks, because they're not all making national headlines. Some of them might not even make the local news, depending on how your area operates. So keep this all in mind. But listen, the water systems are under attack. Like, they're being attacked via cyber warfare. You should be prepared for that and understand that it's possible to happen in your area, no matter how small of an area you live in. If you are connected to a municipality when it comes to a water utilities company, then you need to be aware of the fact that they are vulnerable, right? Something to keep in mind, something that we're all dealing with right now. If you need anything else from me at all, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.